Hello and welcome to the Cat House. This is Mr. MeowsAlot, and this week I read Capitalism and Freedom by Milton Friedman. Milton Friedman is an American economist and philosopher who in 1962 wrote Capitalism and Freedom, in which he promotes the benefits of the capitalist system. He is a Nobel Prize winner for economics and is sort of seen as like the grandfather of capitalist doctrine. The book is a compilation of his speeches or lectures regarding capitalist economics, and it was compiled by his wife and himself into book form. So each chapter is sort of disjointed, but each chapter follows one economic theme, and it is really, really interesting. At the very beginning, in one chapter, he discusses the history of the Federal Reserve. In other chapters, he outlines the benefits of small government and free market on things like education, on poverty, on discrimination, and how it can benefit everybody. And I get the impression that throughout his life he's probably been accused of bigotry or trying to keep certain minority groups down or trying to allow the rich to get richer, poor to get poorer. But throughout the book, he consistently explains that he is not racist, he is not sexist, he is not this, not that, and tries to demonstrate how true free market systems alleviate the lower classes and benefit all in order to improve both economic, political, and civil liberties. And what's really important here in his book is that he's going back to the old school use of liberal, meaning like libertarian, and the promotion of small government. And he says that a libertarian is not the same as an egalitarian, and the differences between the two, and how big government is really not good for people, especially since it tends to take away their rights and freedoms, whereas a capitalist system and free market will, with it like an invisible hand, be able to guide slowly society and civilization towards advancement and progress. He explains how the egalitarian, which in today's lingo would be like the social justice warriors and the millennial generation of wanting change and progress now, regardless of social sentiment or any type of natural progression. And he says that this sort of coercion, where the state imposes the system that people must follow, simply won't work because people aren't adjusted or willing to change that quickly. He says capitalism as a system towards progress, social progress, towards full civil liberties, is a slow operation. And he demonstrates this all through the book by illustrating how a free market will allow everyone to do whatever they want, but social norms that change over time will adjust the system to remove people who aren't following the gradual, slow progress of society. So if you refuse to hire minorities or to serve or to sell to certain types of people, you have a right to do that, he says. However, the free market system will eventually get rid of you because the free market is intent on making a profit. And if you start to minimize or limit the manner in which that profit is made, the system itself removes you from the process. And he makes some really interesting arguments. This is the 40th edition that I've read, and he explains in the new prologue that while it's thrived over time, this book, some adjustment would need to be made post-Cold War, because keep in mind, 1962, when he wrote this, or compiled it, we're, dead center of the Cold War, and, it's capitalism versus communism sort of thing, which enlightens the title for us. And post-Cold War, 2002, he wrote the new prologue, and he says, well, the political, economic, and civil liberties don't always tend to match with countries taking on capitalist systems. And I think a really good book to read in that regard is this one here, False Dawn by John Gray, who's a British economist and philosopher, not the John Gray guru of Mars and Venus. Okay, this is a different guy. John Gray, the British philosopher, economist, is a brilliant thinker. But in False Dawn, he explains that you can export capitalism and Western social norms and stuff, but when people take these systems in, these systems will change and adapt to the new culture. So in it, he discusses Asia, he discusses Russia, he discusses all these countries, and he shows how, yes, they look democratic, they look capitalist, but if you actually go into it, it doesn't act that way in which we live them. So they've been altered. So for instance, I live in South Korea now, and while it has all the the check marks for democracy and capitalist free market, it's really sort of an oligarchy where 30 families run the show. They call them chaebol here, and it's basically a small group of elites. We're talking all, Samsung, LG, Kia, Hyundai, all these major companies are all family run, and they're handed down father to son over generations, and they monopolize the market. So it's a monopoly. It's an oligarchy. It's a small group of elites that run everything. They do have a government that's democratically elected and stuff, but these guys are all in cahoots. The companies and families run at the behest of the government. So yes, it's capitalist democracy, but not as we know it. And that's the case with every country. They sort of embrace the idea, and then it all gets shifted around. The same thing I think could be said for human rights and anything else that we think are universal concepts, or that will just simply be easily exported as an idea and be the same, and it's just simply not. It's a really interesting book. Milton Friedman is a controversial figure. As I said, he has to keep explaining that he's not trying to keep poor people poor and minorities down. He keeps saying that he's, for improving the lives of everyone. But yeah, it's a really interesting book. It's well worth a read. his look into private education over public, and his real sort of cautionary tale about the dangers of big government, and how the egalitarians, and at this point the modern day liberals, the Democratic Party in the USA or the Liberal Party in Canada, etc., how they really, really want to have the biggest government possible and to get into everyone's business and tell them how to run their lives, how to think, what to say. And he explains that, you know, you're removing the whole point of democracy and freedom and civil liberties. And he calls it a really sort of paternalistic outlook, because he frequently in the book says that a big government in that form is looking at the populace, at the citizenry, as being unable, too weak, too vulnerable to be able to make its own choices, that it has to be looked after, right? That the people cannot be trusted to do the right thing, but without ever taking into account that change is a process, that evolution doesn't mean progress, it means change. And as such, change is not necessarily good or bad. The same way that he says the capitalist system is the free market is interested in profit, not morality. But the free market is driven by individual preference, and as society changes through individuals themselves changing, that the free market will help determine that progression. I'm not explaining it correctly. He does a much better job, obviously. I fully recommend the book. It was very exciting to read. I had never read Milton Friedman. I had seen some interviews, black and white, but he's done interviews. You can find them on YouTube. He did interviews at universities, lectures. His question and answers are always interesting, because he fully promotes that if government steps back, which it hasn't done, and he explains in the book, since the New Deal, prior to World War II, during the Great Depression, that the social welfare system that's been imposed is keeping people down. It's not helping them, because big government isn't out to relieve the problem. It's causing the problem. Fascinating read. Keep reading. I'll be back next week with another book review from the Cat House. This is Mr. MeowsAlot. Take care.